Thanks everyone for joining our joint webinar with CircleCI and Cypress.io. We want to give it just another minute for all of our attendees to get in, and we'll be with you shortly. All right, welcome everyone. Again, this is the joint webinar with CircleCI and Cypress.io. I'm Eddie Webb. I'm a solutions engineer with CircleCI. I just wanted to go over a little bit of logistics for today's webinar. We are using Zoom webinar. You'll find within your Zoom panel, there's a Q&A button down below. So through the course of the discussion, if you have any questions, please throw them into that and we'll do our best to speak to them all at the end. Any questions we can't get to, we'll speak to offline as well. We're also going to make the slides and this video recording available after the webinar. So with that, I'd like to let Gleb introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Gleb Bahmutov. I'm VP of Engineering at Cypress.io, and it's great to be here. Well, I guess I'll start, Eddie. Or do you have any parting words?
It's your show.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, in this webinar, you will learn how to run Cypress end-to-end tests for any web application, and how to configure your task to run on Circle continuous integration server with minimal effort and without errors. So a couple of words about myself. I've done a lot of full stack development in different languages, but now I mostly work in JavaScript. You can find my open source projects on GitHub and my presentations, including this one, on slides.com. I represent Cypress.io, a small company of just 15 people. We have created Cypress, an open source end-to-end test runner that I'm about to show. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia, but most of our engineers work remotely. In this webinar, I'll show how to write Cypress end-to-end tests, how to run them on CircleCI, including in parallel mode, and then I'll show how the configuration can be made very simple using the new Circle Orb feature. Finally, we'll answer any questions that you might have. Let's start with our objectives. Imagine you have a web application and you want to make sure that it works as expected. We need to write some tests, but not just unit or integration tests, but the full end-to-end tests. The key features of end-to-end tests are they open a real browser and not just JavaScript emulation. They load the actual application. They don't try to stop it. They interact with the application just like a real user. And finally, they check that the application works by checking the page and maybe network requests. We at Cypress strongly believe that end-to-end tests are crucial for good user experience. The testing pyramid should really be turned upside down, with end-to-end tests emphasized. If the end-to-end tests cover all user stories and pass consistently, the chances are high that the users will be able to use your web application without problems. We don't argue against unit tests, by the way. They're still important to developers. Luckily, there are a lot of other tools for writing good unit tests, and they're outside of the scope of this webinar. Let's start using Cypress Test Runner. It's just an npm package, and you install it using npm install Cypress command. This installs Cypress npm package and downloads a binary matching your operating system. Aside from this single install, you don't have to install anything else. All tools and assertion libraries are bundled into Cypress. We build a binary for each major operating system, like Windows, Mac, Linux. And the test run itself is 100% open source and MIT licensed and is not limited in any way. You can find the full source code in this GitHub repo. Also, don't forget to give it a GitHub star. Here's a typical end-to-end test written in Cypress. The test uses Mocha syntax, which is familiar to many developers. In this test, the browser should visit localhost 3000, find an element with CSS class new to do, and type learn testing, followed by the enter key. Then the browser will type be cool into the same element and press enter again. These are a few commands. And now we need to assert that the application has indeed added two to-do items to the list. We'll ask scigget for elements with selector .to-do list li, just like jQuery, and assert that this list contains exactly 2 items. Let me actually show how this works in practice. So I'm going to switch from slides to actual application. So this is the application running locally. I can add to-dos just like a normal user would use the app. Here's the test in my VS Code. This is the same test we've seen before. Let me switch to the terminal and start Cypress in interactive mode by using Cypress open command. It's Electron binary, like I said before, created specifically for each platform. And at the start, it shows me the list of my test files or spec files. If I click on a spec file, it starts a full browser. In this case, I'm running Electron, but you can run Chrome, Chrome Canary, and we're working on cross-browser support as well. You can see the full application iframe on the right, and you can watch the test operate the web application just like a normal user through the DOM events. You see different tests do different features, type, delete, mark to-dos as completed, and the app itself is running through the test very, very quickly. Right now, it finished 24 tests, and I'm just going to pause it for a second because, yeah, there are a lot of tests, but we want to really focus on a single one. Let me go back to my editor and set the focus on a single test using it.only. When I save the test, Cypress actually watches my source code and already has rerun the test itself. On the left, you see the command log that shows how the application looked during each command. Notice that there are commands, site.get, site.type, right here on the left. Cypress takes dumb snapshots of your app every time it notices that something has changed. So when my application visited the page, the app looked like this, right? The browser just started loading. When it got the new to-do class selector, well, this is the element. It's highlighted right here in the iframe, so I can see which element I'm about to type into. Here's the type command. Notice that it shows before and after dump snapshot, because Cypress has noticed that when it typed a command, then the dump has changed because the application really took that new item and added it to the list. If I hover over the second type, it shows how the application reacted to typing the second to-do item. Finally, when I get the list items, it first of all selected 2 matched elements, but it also highlights them in a dump snapshot. And finally, the last command was an assertion. We confirmed that there were really 2 list items in our application. Excellent. So even if my test is long, even if it tests the full user story, I can still go back and observe my application behavior through every command to make sure that our application did what we expected it to do. There are a couple of nice things built into Cypress, aside from the time-traveling debugger. For example, this is a full browser, so I can open my DevTools, and anytime I click on a command, in a console, it actually shows more information, so I can drill down and really debug the test behavior, and especially if a test is failing. The same is true for every command. Not only I have a full DevTools in a full browser, Cypress comes with built-in command retries because the nature of a web is unpredictable. Everything is asynchronous and everything can change, and you can never expect that things happen when things are instantaneous. So let me go back to my test, and let's say that instead of 2 items, for some reason, I want 5 items. Okay, Cypress has noticed that I changed my source and has rerun the test. And notice that the test hasn't failed right away. Let me rerun it again. Notice how the last command and assertion keeps retrying, keeps spinning around. Cypress doesn't immediately fail an assertion. Instead, it goes back to the previous command and retries it again and again until it either passes and the test continues, or it times out. And by default, it's 4 seconds. So I can change the timeout because sometimes my app needs a longer timeout. So I'm going to add a timeout parameter, and I'm going to just set it to a very long argument. Now see how the blue command and the assertion keep spinning, because right now it's really looking for 5 elements, but there are only 2. So it's a full application running in this iframe. So why don't I help it? So I'm going to say 1. And notice that assertion now prints, I'm looking for 5 elements, but I got 3. Let's say 2. Okay, we have 4 elements. You can guess what happens when I type 5. Boom. All of a sudden, get list items return 5 elements which passed the assertion, and now my test has passed. This built-in retriability is built into every command and every assertion in Cypress, and it makes testing modern web application as natural and as flake-free as possible without inserting hard-coded weights. But here's something else that people like. I've been running this test in interactive mode. I'm modifying my application, I'm modifying my test, and I can watch the test rerun and pass or fail, kind of like test-driven end-to-end test development. But there is a second mode in Cypress that is headless. So let me close Cypress right now. Let me remove this timeout, otherwise it will take a very long time. And now let me go to my terminal. And instead of doing npx Cypress open, I'm going to do Cypress run. So right now, Cypress is running, but it's running in a headless mode, in this case using Electron. It found my spec file, and it's running just my test that I made fail on purpose. And I made it fail on purpose to show a couple of nice things that I built into Cypress that you don't have to configure. First of all, it shows the same error as before. Timed out retrying, not enough elements found. Found 2 list items, expected 5, because we made it fail on purpose. But aside from the stack trace and the error message, notice that the application took screenshots. Let me show the screenshot. As soon as the test fails, Cypress in headless mode takes a screenshot. It takes it at that exact moment, so it hasn't even updated the assertion, because if it re-renders, it has to wait, and the application might look different. So it takes a screenshot at the exact moment of failure, and you can store that screenshot on CircleCI as a test artifact, so you can come back and debug and look at the app and see how it looked when the test failed. So screenshots are nice, but it's not all. Notice there is a video tab, and it says finish processing. Cypress by default in headless mode captures the full video of a test run. So let's see how that looks. I'm going to play the video. So this was just captured, and it shows the full browser, including the command log and the iframe of application. Again, you should store this video as a test artifact on your CircleCI server. And whenever something fails, just look at the video. Maybe go back to the previously passing test run and look at the video of a passing test to see where things change. To me, my developer experience with the screenshots on failure, with videos, are extremely, extremely productive. And you don't have to configure anything. It's all built in. So now that we've seen how the Cypress operates, let me go to my presentation. As I said, Cypress opens Cypress in interactive mode, where you can iterate on a test. And Cypress run runs in headless mode. That's what you will run on continuous integration server. And in this mode, Cypress still has a couple of nice features to make the test runs useful, such as screenshots, full video. But here's a problem. We wrote Cypress and we prepared examples how to run Cypress, how to set it up correctly on different CI platforms. Our documentation has a long list. Each CI provider has an example. We are trying to make examples as easy as possible to follow. Unfortunately, these example CI configs are still long and complex. So here's our typical CircleCI config file. First, you need to make sure that the container has all operating system dependencies Cypress requires to run. The easiest way to handle this is to use a Docker image. In this case, a Cypress Docker image that we have prepared and push to Docker Hub. So you need to set the image name in a config file. Then you need to cache both NPM modules and Cypress binary to make sure that CI runs do not waste time installing Cypress again and again. It's quite large download. This config restores the old cache first, and then saves the cache after installing dependencies. In between the cache commands, you need to run the npm install Cypress command. Sometimes you need to start the server to serve your web application or build it before running web application. In this case, the start command should run in the background. Finally, we can start our end-to-end tests. Every user can copy our example config file, paste it into the repository, push the code to the CI, and then see if CI passes. And usually there are some adjustments that need to be made, which means the config file has to be edited and pushed again and again. And the entire process of tweaking the copied example and waiting for CI to validate it is time-consuming and frustrating, to be fair. Before we move to Circle Orbs and how they can help, we must say that the previous config was the absolutely basic one. In reality, the CI configuration is even more complex. And it is complex because our users are not running just a few tests. Instead, they have a lot of tests, and the CI must finish them quickly. We came up with our own test parallelization algorithm that can load balance a large set of test files across multiple CI machines with minimal configuration. In our approach, every CI machine connects to a central API, and the API tells each machine what to run, splitting the entire test set efficiently. This is how Cypress command looks. When you run Cypress run -- record, you add a new flag -- parallel, and that should be it. This feature has been released in version 3.1 of Cypress Test Runner. And as usual, the detailed documentation is on our docs website. Our internal Cypress Dashboard projects end-to-end tests are themselves a perfect example of load balancing in action. If we run all the specs that we have for our dashboard, and there are 32 spec files with almost 1,000 end-to-end tests, the entire run finishes in 23 minutes. And this is with all backend API calls stopped using CyRoute already. So you see why we implemented load balancing for Cypress, because we need it desperately ourselves. If we split it across 6 machines, the entire run finishes in less than 4 minutes. Let me zoom on the results. Going from 23 minutes to 4 is a great speed up. This is mathematically almost perfect. This project is less than 1% away from exactly dividing the total spec runtime by 6. Just for fun, I have run the dashboard test using a different number of machines to parallelize the test. And you can see from the table, even a few machines can significantly speed up the run. In our case, when we use 10 CircleCI machines, the test ran 10 times faster. As you add a lot of machines, each additional one brings only a diminishing return. So I would decide for myself, what is the acceptable test run duration for your project? Unfortunately, the parallel test run mode makes the CI configuration even more difficult. Here's a typical CircleCI YAML file. You now have to configure several jobs because you want to install dependencies only once and then run tests across several machines, which means you need to configure CircleCI workspace to pass the installed dependencies. And you need to pass the desired parallel flags to run the test correctly. And we have written parallel CI configuration files for every CI provider. And they are all pretty verbose. And we expect our users to copy, paste, and tweak them. And you can guess the results. We fully expect our users to make mistakes, get frustrated, and in general have a hard time configuring their CI. And we have no way of helping them. Luckily, we have some good news. Oh, should I say CircleCI has some good news, right, Eddie? So when we heard about CircleCI Orbs, we were intrigued. And when we saw the initial documentation and we got into the technology partner program with Circle, we got super excited. So here's the good news. CircleCI Orbs are reusable pieces of CI configuration code. We at Cypress.io can write an orb, and Cypress users can use that orb to run Cypress Test Runner correctly. And the orb will ensure that everything is configured correctly and is run correctly, and all the flags are what is needed. And let me show how it's done. Here's a simple CircleCI YAML file that runs Cypress end-to-end tests using CircleCI Orb. This is the entire config file. And yet this configuration sets every option necessary. It has the Docker image, it has the right caching, it has Cypress run command. Everything is configured for you. Let me walk you through this configuration file step by step. First, the user declares the orbs to bring using namespace and version, similar to NPM registry. In this case, there is only one orb called Cypress. It comes from Cypress.io namespace that we control at our company. And user wants a specific version of that orb, in this case, 1.1.0. Having immutable orb versions helps with immutable builds and control CI configuration upgrades without any nasty surprises. Our user workflow has only a single job called Cypress run. And the user didn't have to write it. It's written by us, the Cypress team. And it's part of Cypress Orb. That's where it's defined. Our Cypress Orb can do different things depending on the job parameters. For example, in order to record test artifacts like screenshots and videos on Cypress Dashboard, the user would need to pass record true parameter to the Cypress run job. The job parameters are all defined in Orb, are statically checked and documented. There is no need to tweak the command parameters, etc. All the things that make configuration error-prone are taken care of. Here is the most complex parallel test execution config file, and it's not more complicated than the simple case. Again, everything is controlled via job parameters. We need to set record true because running in parallel requires the Cypress API to balance tests. We need to declare that we want to run tests in parallel using parallel true flag. And we need to tell CircleCI how many machines to spin to run the test. In this case, we pass value 10 to parallelism parameter. In this workflow, we're using Cypress install job defined in Cypress Orb, and the install step will run on a single machine. Once it finishes, then our workflow will execute tests using 10 CircleCI machines, load balancing all tests across them. This is simple and powerful. Despite all these parameters, your project might eventually reach a point where our Cypress Orb does not do all the things that you need. In this case, you will need to go from using an orb to configuring the Circle config YAML file directly. Luckily, this is possible, and I'll show you how next. If you take an existing config YAML file like this one that uses Cypress Circle Orb, and you install CircleCI local CLI utility, you can run a command from the terminal CircleCI config process. This command will take your config file as an input and will process all the orbs, resolve all the parameters, and it will print the effective config that the orb will resolve to. In this case, this is the complex config that I have shown before. You can take the output that's shown here and save it as your Circle YAML file, tweak it, and go from there. Just be careful, because there is no way of going back from tweaked custom config to using the default Cypress Orb. Okay, so that was Cypress Orb and how to run your end-to-end Cypress test using the Orb. But where do all the orbs live? It is published to the CircleCI Orb Registry, and you can find a lot of orbs there already, published by authors of the tools. For Cypress Orb, on the registry website, you will find the documentation for the orb's job, all the job parameters, executors, and many, many examples. Here's our orb on a Circle Orb registry. You have all your commands, and you have all the examples. The simple example is the one that I have shown. If you want to run your test using Node 6, for example, you can use a different executor. If you want to record your test, there is examples for that. If you want to run your test using Chrome browser, you have an example of that, and it's just passing a parameter. All the examples are verified every time we publish an orb, so they should be correct. You can find the orb source on GitHub. We have an open source repository called cypress-io/CircleCI-orb with everything that I have shown before. If you have a problem with our orb, you can open an issue. Or if you want to suggest a feature, open an issue as well. Even better, if you open a pull request that implements that feature, of course, or fixes that bug. And thanks to GitHub feature, you can subscribe to notifications when we publish a new version of Orb if you watch the releases on that GitHub repo. So let me summarize. I have shown Cypress end-to-end test runner. But even more important, I have shown how to run Cypress end-to-end tests using CircleCI Orbs for configuration. To me, the CircleCI Orbs make configuring CI extremely easy. So easy, in fact, that I would put Orbs next to using Docker to run tests on CI. That's how excited I am about Orbs. The main advantage of Orb is that it allows us, the tool offers, to write and publish CI configuration code. This means that the users don't have to do this and can concentrate on the important stuff, like writing a well-tested and useful web application. If you want to learn more about CircleCI Orbs, here are links to the main resources. The Orb docs are really good. And you can find all published registered orbs at the CircleCI Orbs registry. And also you can just search on GitHub for a topic CircleCI-orbs to find repos that implement the orbs, including our orb. And CircleCI hosts a community forum where you can ask a question or open a support ticket. If your company wants to write an orb or become a technology partner, the link is right here. And I think this is my last slide. You can find the CircleCI Cypress Orb at the GitHub URL. If you want to follow Cypress or me or CircleCI itself, here are the Twitter handles. And these slides are public at this URL. And we have a couple of questions, right, Eddie? So we will be happy to answer them right now.
Yep, looks like the first one's for you, Gleb. Can Cypress show the exact timestamp of every step in a test timeline?
No, not yet. I think this is a great feature, and we should think about it. It's a great thing. Yes, yes. Showing a timestamp of each command in a command log would be really nice. And I think the next one is, again, for Cypress team. How should we pass authorization token from test to test? So look at our documentation. We have a lot of examples for passing basic auth to setting a token, to setting a cookie, to make sure that these things are taken care of. How does this relate to the paid Cypress service? So running the test runner, using it is absolutely free. It's MIT license. It's not feature limited in any way. The only paid features for Cypress is when you use our dashboard to record test artifacts, like screenshots, videos, parallelization, use parallelization feature. If you don't use our dashboard, you can still get your screenshots and videos and just store it yourself as artifacts on Circle. So you don't have to use our dashboard or any paid features in order to get the videos or store them yourself. I think I'll take the cross-browser testing question as well. Do you have any news about cross-browser testing? When is it coming? Believe me, we're working hard on this. We want to do it as fast as possible, but there are a couple of stages that have to happen in order for cross-browser to be released, such as native events. We will release it as soon as we finish it and as soon as it's stable and passes all the tests and can be maintained in a long run. So I cannot promise a strict date, unfortunately. Can you start a server in a Cypress Orb config? Yes. As I showed, there is an example of starting. If you look at Cypress Orb, you will find an example of starting the server before running a test. And there is a second feature. You can start the server and wait on a specific URL for URL to respond before starting the test. So imagine your server command actually builds the app, and it takes, let's say, 30 seconds. Well, you don't want to start the test until that process finishes. So there is a wait on feature that allows you to wait for the server to actually respond before starting the test. Is it possible to use Cypress for testing web apps using WebGL to render images? Not really. We really right now only have commands that interact and check the DOM on the network or local storage. We don't have anything for WebGL, but you can write your own custom commands that, for example, could go and grab a canvas rendered by WebGL, for example, and maybe inspect it and assert that the WebGL has rendered what you expect it to render. But this is a custom code that you'll have to do. So can we do parallelization feature in Circle without the paid plan? Unfortunately, no. If you use Circle, you can do parallelization yourself by generating a Circle YAML file that configures a separate job for each spec. So it will be not as fast as our parallelization, but uses previous timings to optimize the test run ordering. So but you'll have still a parallelization at a job level. We are switching how we are counting the private versus public test runs. And if you are working on an open source project, you will be able to actually run and use all paid features of Cypress for free. So if your project is open source, you'll be able to use even the paid features. And this is coming pretty soon. Can existing Selenium tests be converted to use Cypress? Yes, but I haven't tried it myself. So Cypress doesn't use Selenium, but means the testing philosophy where the tests run are very, very different. Some of our users actually submitted a plugin, and it's included on Cypress documentation plugins page. And that plugin allows you to convert tests that use WebDriver to tests that use Cypress. But we cannot guarantee that it works. It's completely user space implementation. We hope that our syntax and our documentation makes writing new tests or converting existing tests manually a pretty straightforward approach. So, but it's a conversation that has to happen.
I can actually say I've had to convert a Selenium test myself, and it's pretty quick to pick up on the Cypress syntax. So there's some effort, but it's not bad at all.
Thank you, Eddie. We appreciate the kind words. Yeah. So when you see that the tests open on one side of your screen and the results on another, and your code editor, you just keep writing the test, and you see the results. So it's easy to actually convert the test for existing application. What browsers do you plan to support besides Chromium-based? So immediately, right now, all our effort is going towards IE11, right? Now, Microsoft Edge is actually moving towards Chromium-based, but you still need IE11 support. So we're working on IE11 support. We have majority of Firefox support done. Firefox compared to IE11 is much simpler. So we're trying to get IE11 in a good state so we can release it, but it probably will be the first browser besides Chromium-based what we plan to support. What is on your roadmap? Which features in Cypress are coming next? If you go to either our GitHub repository or if you go to our documentation, there is a link to roadmap. You can see what things we want to release next. The big one besides cross-browser are test retries. So you know how if you have, let's say, 100 tests, and this test tests the whole system. Sometimes the network can have a hiccup, a browser can have a hiccup. These are complicated things. Sometimes, let's say, a test randomly fails, right? And if you have 100 tests and each one has a 1% of randomly failing, and then if you run it again, it just passes, then out of 100 tests, there is a chance that some of them, or at least one, will fail, and you have no idea why. And if you retry it again, everything passes. But what happens on Circle, right? This will, even a single flaky test will stop the whole build, right? The pipeline, the workflow will be red, and you cannot deploy, you cannot commit, right? So we're working on retries that will retry a failing test up to the number that you set, right? And this all will be configurable. And if a test passes, then the build doesn't fail. Yet you will have that information that this particular test, fails, let's say, 10% of the time, right? And then you can look into maybe there's something about race condition in your app or the test, and you can actually, make the test flake-free. So the test retries is the next big feature that we'll release. Do you plan to support visual regression testing, for example, like Applitools? Okay, it's funny that you mentioned Applitools. Applitools has a plugin for Cypress that actually does this visual regression testing for you using Cypress as the test runner. So just look at either our plugins page or at Applitools, and you'll find the plugin, and then you can use visual regression with your Cypress test. It's not just Applitools. Percy.io has a plugin, so you have a choice of visual regression testing tools for Cypress. Is it possible to open multiple browsers to test real-time chat, for example? You should read our documentation and our guides. Right now with Cypress, you can really control a single tab, and testing a real-time chat application by opening multiple tabs and trying to control them, it's not the best way of testing that application. You should have a single app, a single tab, and then have the other client being your test code, right? So you should stop everything that is outside of your direct web application, because then you can really control it. How do you incorporate this into existing CircleCI YAML file? This is actually a great question, right, Eddie? And Eddie, do you mind answering this one? How do people with existing configs move towards using Orbs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, the links that Gleb shared are great because there's a particular section on just reusable configuration in general. So you can start by taking your existing config.yaml and identify where are there opportunities for duplication that you want to eliminate and start declaring them as reusable components and reference them in other sections of your config.yaml. The examples Gleb showed for Cypress were just calling the single job, right? I just want to run, and it encapsulated all the individual commands for you, which is super easy to get started. If you have an existing configuration, you can actually pick and choose the individual steps from that job and insert them. So rather than installing Cypress and configuring all the things, you could just say, I have an org called Cypress, and within my existing job, I want to call Cypress install, and I want to call Cypress run. And you can also chain orbs and existing configuration together. So at the end of your Cypress job, you might have a post step that calls the Slack orb to notify your team that the latest tests have run. And we've got really great examples of all that out on our documentation page. So I encourage you to take a look out there.
Yes, you're not limited to just using jobs from the orb or a single orb. You can have some jobs that come from one orb and then have your other jobs already there defined in your config file. So that's a great answer. I have another one that I like. Does parallelization on CircleCI have load balancing feature, and how does it work exactly? So our parallelization is independent of a CI system. It's just in CircleCI, in order to spin more boxes to do the same thing, you just have parallelism colon 10, for example, or 20, or 5, or 2. It's really easy to spin more boxes on Circle and have everything being load balanced. In order for you to learn how Cypress does our load balancing, go to our docs page. We have the whole page on the videos and webinars, and I've done a webinar that just discusses load balancing last month. So you will find all the slides and the video, how it does it there, okay? Is JUnit test summaries built into the Orb test summary feature? No, not yet. We actually do not support different reporters in the Orb right now, but in the Orb, you can actually configure your custom Cypress run command. In that case, you can run Cypress yourself with any parameters that you want, and that's where you can pass a reporter option and configure a different reporter. Let's see. Some of the questions now become longer and longer. A feature to suggest flaky test detection based on both retries. Yes, that's exactly what we plan to do, right? If we consistently notice that a particular test has to be retried a couple of times, then we will mark it as flaky and we'll give you a nice chart and summary that will actually tell you that this is flaky. So is the Circle running the test, or is it all happening on Cypress Dashboard? So the last question in this column, yes, CircleCI is running everything. It's spinning, the container. It's running Cypress there. All the test data, the video, the screenshot, it's all there on Circle. The Cypress Dashboard is just optional thing to upload the test results as a last step after the test is finished. But it does run on your CI machine. What else? What else? So this is done. My app. I'm having issues testing a loading spinner. Sometimes the spinner disappears too quickly and the test fails. Any suggestions? Cypress runs its test right in the browser. So it sits right there next to your application inside the iframe. Your application doesn't see the testing code, but the test code can directly peer into the iframe. And that means that if a spinner disappears too quickly, you can actually reach inside your application and stop or modify your application's behavior, for example, to delay an action so that the spinner stays on longer and you can actually detect it. The same is true for network requests. If your spinner is tied to a network request and the network request is too fast, in Cypress, it's easy to intercept that network request, slow it down, delay it, and then your spinner will be absolutely under your control, and then you can test it. You can also test things like using fixtures or stubbing responses from your API to control your application behavior, and really testing all those edge cases like a network request failing, a network request timing out, or network request returning bad data. Where does our API live? If applicable, do we have to make it with spin-out?
So I think that this question is asking, because the tests run in CircleCI, everything is within that environment. So your front-end web app, if there's a back-end API you need to talk to, that can all run within the container. CircleCI supports the idea of secondary images within your job. So you could have your UI running in the primary build container, and then also spin up an additional Docker container that represents your backend APIs or database services, whatever else you might need. Again, the idea that's all encapsulated within the CircleCI build environment. And it's, if you elect for the optional record feature, it will send that information back to Cypress to record that for historical value.
There's so many possible ways you can define what your tests should do. It can spin a local server and a local web application and test everything locally. It can put them into different containers, like Eddie just said. You might be testing actual production application that's already deployed somewhere, and only your test and Cypress will run inside a Circle container. You can literally point your test not at a local host, but at, I don't know, google.com and test Google. You're not limited in any way. If your API needs a specific, if it leaves behind a specific like proxy or some kind of authentication mechanism, well, you have to give Cypress some way of reaching that API or web application. Could be basic auth or some kind of login, right? It's up to you, and there are lots of possibilities. And if our documentation doesn't cover it right now, let us know, or even like give us an example, because our docs, like everything, are open source, and other users might benefit from your pull request. We just have, okay, excellent. Do you anticipate aggregating data from runs that are stored on the dashboard to allow for failure runtime analysis? Yes, so our dashboard collects that information. It collects your test results. And right now the dashboard itself shows it, but we're thinking about providing an API so that you can query your test data, and so you can actually analyze it yourself. But that's still not even under development, but that's what we're considering as a feature as well. Eddie, do you have any other questions? Or I think we are actually done.
Yeah, it looks like that wraps them up, and we're coming up on time. This was a great discussion. I've used Cypress myself, and I was still excited seeing everything that Gleb went through. I really appreciate all the great questions from the audience. As I mentioned earlier, this was being recorded. We'll make it available online afterwards, so look for a follow-up to those of you that registered. And as Gleb mentioned, his slides are up online as well, and so you can grab those there. Thank you so much, everyone.
Happy testing, everyone.